Emma Martinez sat at her kitchen table in her modest two-bedroom apartment in Denver, Colorado, sorting through the mail with the methodical precision she'd developed over the past 6 months of living alone. Bills, advertisements, and catalogs, the usual suspects that filled her days since David had moved out. The divorce papers had been signed 3 weeks ago, a surprisingly civil end to 12 years of marriage that had felt more like a business partnership in its final years. The morning, sun streamed through her east-facing window, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor she'd refinished herself last month. It was a small victory, learning to use power tools at 34. But Emma had discovered she was capable of more than she'd ever imagined during her marriage. The physical work had been therapeutic, drowning out the constant replay of conversations, with David about growing apart and wanting different things. She almost missed it, a cream-colored envelope mixed in with the credit card offers. Her name was typed across the front in professional font. Emma Martinez, 2847 Maple Street, Apartment 4B, Denver, CO 80205. No return address, but the postmark showed it had come from downtown Denver. Emma tore it open with the same casual indifference she'd shown the rest of her mail, expecting another solicitation, or perhaps a final piece of paperwork related to the divorce. Instead, she found herself staring at letterhead from Morrison and Associates, attorney at law, in bold, intimidating font. "Dear Mrs. Martinez," the letter began, and Emma's stomach immediately tightened. "We represent Ms. Victoria Chen in a matter concerning damages resulting from your marriage to David Martinez. Please be advised that our client intends to pursue legal action against you for emotional distress and financial compensation related to the interference with her relationship with your now ex-husband." Emma read the sentence 3 times before. The words began to make sense. Victoria Chen. She'd never heard that name in her life. The letter continued with legal jargon about willful interference with prospective economic advantage and intentional infliction of emotional distress. But Emma's mind had stopped processing the technical language. Her hands trembled as she set the letter down on the kitchen table, the same table where she and David had shared countless meals, planned vacations, and discussed their future children. Children they'd kept putting off until the time was right. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was now reading about his mistress at the same place they'd shared their dreams. Emma picked up her phone and scrolled to David's contact. They'd agreed to keep communication minimal post-divorce, only reaching out for necessary matters like tax documents or insurance changes. This certainly qualified as necessary. "David, it's Emma. I just received a very interesting letter from someone named Victoria Chen. I think we need to talk." Her voice was steadier than she felt. The phone buzzed almost immediately with his response. "Can we meet for coffee? Starbucks on 16th Street in an hour?" Emma stared at the text message, noting how quickly he'd responded. No confusion about who Victoria Chen was, no questions about what letter she meant. Just an immediate request to meet, which told her everything she needed to know about how long this had been going on. She showered and dressed with deliberate care, choosing a navy blue blazer over dark jeans. Professional, but not trying too hard. As she applied her makeup, Emma studied her reflection in the bathroom mirror. At 34, she still looked young, though the stress of the past year had added fine lines around her green eyes. Her auburn hair, which David had always loved, now felt like armor as she pulled it back into a sleek ponytail. The drive to downtown Denver took 25 minutes in midday traffic. Emma had always loved this city, with its blend of urban sophistication and mountain town charm. She and David had moved here right after college, drawn by the job opportunities and outdoor lifestyle. They'd talked about buying a house in the suburbs, maybe something with a view of the Rockies, but that dream had evaporated along with everything else. David was already waiting when she arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 coffee cups in front of him. He looked thinner than when she'd last seen him at the lawyer's office, his usually perfectly styled brown hair slightly disheveled. His blue eyes, which had once made her heart skip, now just looked tired. "Emma, I'm so sorry," he began before she'd even sat down. "I never wanted you to find out this way." "Find out what way, David?" Emma kept her voice level as she settled into the chair across from him. "Find out that you've been cheating on me? Or find out that your girlfriend is now suing me for something I didn't even know existed?" David winced at the word cheating, which struck Emma as almost comical. After 12 years of marriage, he was still worried about labels. "It's complicated," he said, pushing one of the coffee cups toward her. "Victoria and we met 2 years ago at a marketing conference in Las Vegas. It wasn't supposed to happen, Emma. It just did. 2 years. Emma let that sink in while she processed the timeline. 2 years ago, they'd been going to marriage counseling, trying to work through what they'd both called communication issues. 2 years ago, she'd been blaming herself for not being more interesting, more spontaneous, more whatever it was that David seemed to need. So while I was sitting in Dr. Peterson's office talking about how we could improve our marriage, you were already involved with someone else." "It wasn't like that," David protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "We were already having problems, Emma. You know that. The counseling wasn't helping." Emma took a sip of the coffee. Her usual order, oat milk latte with an extra shot. The fact that he remembered her coffee order after all this time struck her as both touching and infuriating. "Tell me about Victoria Chen," she said. "And tell me why she thinks she can sue me." David ran his hands through his hair, a nervous habit Emma remembered well. "She's a marketing director for a tech company in Boulder. She's been supportive during all of this. The divorce, I mean. She helped me through some really difficult times. The difficult times being married to me, apparently." "That's not fair, Emma." "Fair?" Emma's voice rose slightly, causing a few other customers to glance their way. She lowered it again, not wanting to cause a scene. "David, I'm being sued by a woman I've never met because I was married to my own husband. Nothing about this situation is fair." David leaned forward, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "She's claiming that staying married to you cost her opportunities, financial opportunities. She says that because I couldn't commit fully to our relationship, she turned down job offers and made career decisions based on us." Emma stared at him in disbelief. "She turned down job offers because you were married? That's her choice. David, that's not my fault. I know it sounds crazy, but she has a case. Her lawyer thinks what? That I should have divorced you sooner so your girlfriend could advance her career? That I should have known you were cheating and graciously stepped aside? She's not just my girlfriend, Emma. We're getting married." The words hit Emma like a physical blow. She'd expected it, somewhere in the back of her mind, but hearing it out loud made it real in a way that hurt more than she'd anticipated. "When?" she asked. "Next month. Small ceremony. Just immediate family." Emma did the math quickly. Their divorce had been finalized 3 weeks ago. "You couldn't even wait a month?" "Emma, please understand. I love her. I have for a long time. This isn't about hurting you." "But it is hurting me, David. And now she's suing me on top of everything else." "Why? What does she possibly gain from that?" David looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. "She's claiming that the emotional distress of being involved with a married man affected her work performance and cost her a promotion. She wants compensation for lost wages and punitive damages for emotional suffering." Emma laughed, but there was no humor in it. Emotional suffering. She chose to get involved with a married man, and now she wants to sue the wife for emotional suffering. I know how it sounds. It sounds insane, David. It sounds like your fiancé is either completely delusional or incredibly manipulative. Maybe both. David's jaw tightened, and Emma saw a flash of the defensiveness that had become so familiar during their marriage counseling sessions. Victoria isn't manipulative. She's been through a lot because of this situation. Because of what situation? The situation where she knowingly entered into a relationship with a married man. The situation where she chose to make career decisions based on an affair? None of that is my responsibility, David. She didn't know I was married at first, David said quietly. Emma felt something cold settle in her stomach. What do you mean she didn't know? At the conference, I wasn't wearing my ring. I told her I was single. The betrayal felt fresh all over again. Emma had been at home, probably working late at the nonprofit where she managed donor relations, while David was in Las Vegas pretending to be single and picking up women at marketing conferences. So you lied to her too. I was going to tell her, but then we started talking and she was so interesting, so different from... David stopped himself, but Emma heard the unfinished sentence anyway. So different from you. Different how? Emma asked, surprising herself with the question. She wasn't sure she wanted to know, but she needed to understand what had been missing, what had driven David to create this elaborate deception. She's very driven, very ambitious. She has these big ideas about starting her own company someday. She travels a lot for work, speaks at conferences. She's very independent. Emma absorbed this description, hearing the implicit criticism of her own choices. She turned down several job opportunities over the years that would have required travel or relocation, prioritizing their marriage and the stability David had claimed to want. She'd supported his career moves, even when it meant taking lower-paying positions herself. And when did you finally tell her you were married? About 6 months into our relationship? But by then, we were already... David trailed off. Already what? Already in love? Already planning a future together while you were still married to me? Emma, I never meant for it to happen this way. But it did happen this way, David. And now I'm being sued because your girlfriend made poor career choices based on an affair that you initiated with lies. Emma stood up, her coffee barely touched. I need to see that letter again, and figure out how to respond to this. Do you have any idea how much she's suing me for? David's hesitation was answer enough, but he eventually said, $50,000, plus legal fees. Emma sat back down heavily. $50,000 was more than she made in a year at the nonprofit. It was her entire savings account, and then some. It was the down payment she'd been hoping to save for a small house, her fresh start post-divorce. I don't have $50,000, David. You know that. I know. That's why I was hoping we could work something out. Maybe I could help. Help? You want to help me pay off your fiancé's lawsuit against me? Do you understand how insane that sounds? Other customers were definitely staring now, but Emma didn't care. The absurdity of the situation was overwhelming. Her husband of 12 years had been cheating on her for 2 years, was marrying his mistress a month after their divorce was finalized, and now that same mistress was suing her for $50,000 because being involved with a married man had supposedly damaged her career. I'm going to fight this, Emma said, standing up again. I'm going to fight this with every resource I have, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person Victoria Chen is. Emma, please don't make this uglier than it has to be. Uglier? Emma stared at him in disbelief. David, you destroyed our marriage, lied to both me and your girlfriend, and now she's trying to extort money from me. I didn't make this ugly. You did. She turned to leave, then stopped, and looked back at him. You know what the worst part is? I actually felt bad about the divorce. I thought maybe I hadn't been a good enough wife. Maybe I hadn't tried hard enough. But sitting here listening to you defend the woman who's suing me for being married to you, I realize I wasn't the problem. I never was. Emma left the coffee shop with her head held high, but her hands were shaking as she got into her car. The magnitude of what she was facing was starting to sink in. She wasn't just dealing with the end of her marriage anymore. She was dealing with a legal battle she couldn't afford, against a woman who had everything to gain and nothing to lose. As she drove home through the familiar streets of Denver, Emma made a decision. She wasn't going to let Victoria Chen destroy what was left of her life. She was going to find a lawyer, and she was going to fight back. Not just for the money, but for her dignity, her reputation, and her right to move on from a marriage that had ended in betrayal. The afternoon sun was setting behind the Rocky Mountains as Emma pulled into her apartment complex parking lot. Tomorrow, she would start making phone calls. Tomorrow, she would begin the fight of her life. But tonight, she was going to allow herself to grieve, not just for her marriage, but for the naive woman she'd been that morning, who thought the worst of her divorce was behind her. Emma spent the weekend researching family law attorneys in Denver, calling every number she could find and explaining her bizarre situation to a series of increasingly expensive legal professionals. Most of them seemed intrigued but cautious, asking detailed questions about her financial situation and the strength of Victoria Chen's claims. By Monday morning, Emma had narrowed her choices down to 2 attorneys: Robert Klein, a seasoned divorce lawyer with 30 years of experience who charged $400 an hour, and Sarah Martinez, no relation, despite the shared surname, a younger attorney who specialized in what she called unconventional family law cases and charged $250 an hour. Emma chose Sarah Martinez, partly because of the cost difference, but mostly because when Emma had explained the situation over the phone, Sarah had laughed. Not at Emma, but at the absurdity of the lawsuit itself. "This is either the most creative attempt at extortion I've ever seen," Sarah had said, "or your ex-husband's fiancé has some serious delusions about how the law works. Either way, we're going to fight it." Sarah's office was in a converted, Victorian house near downtown Denver, painted a cheerful yellow with purple trim that somehow managed to look professional rather than whimsical. Emma arrived 15 minutes early for their 10 a.m. appointment, partly from nerves and partly from habit. She'd always been punctual, a trait David had claimed to appreciate but often took for granted. The waiting area was small but comfortable, with mismatched antique furniture and walls lined with law books. Emma was flipping through a copy of Colorado Family Law Quarterly when Sarah emerged from her office, a petite woman in her early 30s with short black hair and intelligent dark eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Emma? I'm Sarah Martinez. Come on back." Sarah's office was a study in organized chaos, with case files stacked on every available surface and a whiteboard covered in what looked like legal flowcharts. Despite the clutter, there was something reassuring about the space. It felt like the office of someone who took on complicated cases and won them. "Tell me everything," Sarah said, settling behind her desk with a legal pad and pen. "From the beginning, and don't leave out any details. Even the ones that seem unimportant might matter later." Emma recounted the entire story, from David's request for a peaceful divorce to the coffee shop confrontation 3 days earlier. Sarah took notes throughout, occasionally asking clarifying questions about dates, amounts, and specific conversations. "Have you had any direct contact with Victoria Chen?" Sarah asked. "None. I'd never even heard her name until I got that letter." "And David never mentioned her during your marriage? Not even in passing?" Emma thought carefully. "He mentioned attending conferences, networking events, that sort of thing. But he never mentioned anyone specific. Certainly not anyone he was having an ongoing relationship with." Sarah made another note. "What about changes in his behavior over the past 2 years? Anything that might indicate he was involved with someone else?" Emma felt uncomfortable discussing the intimate details of her marriage, but she knew it was necessary. "He became more distant, more critical. He started traveling more for work, staying late at the office. He seemed restless, I guess. Like he was looking for something I couldn't provide. Did you confront him about any of this?" "We went to marriage counseling. Dr. Peterson, downtown. David said he felt like we were stuck in a rut, that we'd grown apart. I thought it was normal marriage stuff, you know? Everyone goes through rough patches. Sarah nodded sympathetically. Did the counseling help? For a while, I thought it did. David seemed more engaged, more present. But looking back now, I think he was just going through the motions, probably trying to ease his guilt about the affair. How long did you go to counseling? About 8 months. We stopped going in January, right before David asked for the divorce. Sarah's. Penn paused. He asked for the divorce right after you stopped counseling? About 2 weeks later. He said he'd done a lot of thinking over the holidays and realized we weren't right for each other anymore, that we wanted different things. And you agreed to the divorce? Emma shifted in her chair. I didn't want to at first. I suggested we try a different counselor, maybe take a separation instead of jumping straight to divorce. But David was adamant. He said he'd already made up his mind, that prolonging things would just make it harder for both of us. Did you use the same lawyer? No, we each had our own. David insisted on that, said it would be cleaner. His lawyer handled most of the paperwork, though. The settlement was pretty straightforward. We didn't have kids. We rented instead of owning a house, and we split our assets 50-50. Sarah looked up from her notes. What about debt? We didn't have much. Some credit card debt that we split, my student loans that stayed with me, his car payment that stayed with him. We were pretty good about managing money during our marriage. Any joint accounts you're still connected to? No, everything was separated as part of the divorce. I have my own checking and savings now. Sarah set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. Okay, let's talk about Victoria Chen's claims. According to this letter, she's alleging that your marriage to David interfered with her career advancement and caused her emotional distress. Have you done any research on her? Emma felt slightly embarrassed. I looked her up on LinkedIn and Facebook. She works for a tech company called Innovate Solutions in Boulder. She's been there for 3 years, currently a marketing director. Her LinkedIn profile shows a pretty steady career progression. What about her personal life? Social media posts about travel, lifestyle, that sort of thing. Her Facebook is mostly professional stuff. Company events, industry conferences. But there are some personal posts too. She travels a lot, expensive-looking vacations. She drives a BMW, lives in a nice apartment in Boulder. She doesn't look like someone who's been financially devastated by emotional distress. Sarah smiled. Good. That's exactly the kind of information we need. Now, I'm going to ask you something that might be difficult to hear, but I need you to be completely honest with me. Is there any possibility that you knew about David's affair and chose to ignore it? Emma felt a flash of anger. No, absolutely not. If I had known David was cheating, I would have confronted him immediately. I believe you, Sarah said gently. But Victoria's lawyer is going to argue that you must have known, or at least suspected, and that by staying married to David, you were complicit in causing Victoria emotional distress. We need to be prepared for that argument. How can I be complicit in something I didn't know was happening? You can't, legally speaking. But they're going to try to paint you as the jealous wife who refused to let go, who made David's life miserable and prevented him from being happy with Victoria. Emma thought about this. But that's not true. I agreed to the divorce without fighting. I didn't ask for alimony. I didn't try to take more than half of our assets. I was as cooperative as possible. Which is actually great for our case, Sarah said. It shows that you weren't vindictive or trying to interfere with David's happiness. You were a reasonable person dealing with an unreasonable situation. Sarah pulled out a fresh legal pad. Now, let's talk strategy. We have several options for how to respond to this lawsuit. Emma leaned forward, ready to take notes of her own. Option 1 is to file a motion to dismiss based on the lack of legal standing. Victoria Chen has no right to sue you for being married to David. Marriage is a legal relationship, and spouses can't be held liable for damages to third parties simply for exercising their legal rights. That sounds promising. It is, but it's not guaranteed to work. Some judges might be willing to let the case proceed just to see what evidence Victoria can present. What's option 2? We file a countersuit. If Victoria wants to claim that David's marriage caused her emotional distress, we can argue that her affair with David caused you emotional distress. We can seek damages for the cost of marriage counseling, the emotional impact of the divorce, lost wages if you took time off, work to deal with the situation. Emma considered this. Would that actually work? It's more legally sound than her claim against you. You can prove that David was your husband, that he had an affair, and that the affair caused the breakdown of your marriage. That's a much clearer case of emotional distress than what Victoria is claiming. What's option 3? Sarah grinned. We go on the offensive. We investigate Victoria Chen thoroughly, find out everything we can about her career, her finances, her relationship with David. If she's claiming that the affair damaged her professionally, we need to prove that's not true. And if we can show that she benefited from the relationship, if David helped her career in any way, gave her gifts, paid for trips, then we can argue that she actually gained from the affair, not lost. Emma felt a spark of something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope mixed with righteous anger. What would that investigation involve? We'd hire a private investigator to look into Victoria's background, her financial situation, her travel records, her social media history. We'd subpoena David's financial records to see if he spent money on Victoria during the affair. We'd interview people who know both of them to get a clearer picture of their relationship. How much would all of that cost? Sarah consulted her notes. The investigator I work with charges $75 an hour. For a thorough investigation, we're probably looking at 40-50 hours of work, so around $3,000, $4,000, plus court costs, filing fees, and my time. Emma did some quick math. Even with the investigation costs, she'd be spending far less than the $50,000 Victoria was seeking. And if they won, Victoria would have to pay Emma's legal fees. There's one more thing to consider, Sarah said. This case is unusual enough that it might attract media attention. A spurned mistress suing the wife for emotional damages. That's the kind of story that local news outlets love. Are you prepared for that possibility? Emma thought about her job at the nonprofit, her friends, her family. The idea of her personal life being splashed across the news was terrifying, but she realized she was more angry than afraid. If that's what it takes to show people what kind of person Victoria Chen really is, then yes, I'm prepared for that. Sarah nodded approvingly. Good, because I think we're going to win this case, and I think we're going to win it big. But I need you to be absolutely certain you want to fight this. Once we file our response and countersuit, there's no going back. This is going to get messy, and it's going to be emotionally difficult. Emma thought about the woman she'd been just a week ago, quietly accepting her divorce and trying to rebuild her life in obscurity. That woman was gone, replaced by someone who was tired of being treated like a disposable inconvenience in her own story. I want to fight, Emma said firmly. I want to fight for myself, and I want to make sure no other woman ever has to deal with something this ridiculous. Sarah smiled and extended her hand. Then let's get started. As Emma shook her lawyer's hand, she felt something shift inside her. For the first time since receiving Victoria's letter, she wasn't just reacting to other people's choices. She was making her own choice, and it felt powerful. The investigation would begin immediately, Sarah told her. They would file their response to Victoria's lawsuit by the end of the week, along with a countersuit that would turn the tables on David's fiancée. Emma left the office with a thick folder of paperwork to review, and a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Walking back to her car, Emma looked up at the mountains visible from downtown Denver and made herself a promise. By the time this case was over, Victoria Chen would regret ever hearing the name Emma Martinez. The private investigator Sarah had recommended turned out to be a former Denver police detective named Marcus Rivera. a soft-spoken man in his 50s, who wore unremarkable clothes and had the kind of face that people forgot 5 minutes after meeting him. Emma suspected these were valuable qualities in his line of work. They met at a small cafe near the University of Denver, where Marcus spread out a collection of manila folders and began walking Emma through what he'd discovered about Victoria Chen in just 2 weeks of investigation. "Your instincts were right," Marcus said, opening the first folder. "Victoria Chen is not the financially struggling victim she's pretending to be." He pulled out a series of photographs. Victoria getting out of a late-model BMW. Victoria at what looked like an expensive restaurant. Victoria standing in front of a luxury apartment building in Boulder. "She's been living well above her stated salary for the past 2 years," Marcus continued. "Her apartment rent is $2,800 a month, which should be difficult to afford on a marketing director's salary, even in Boulder's tech scene." Emma studied the photos. Victoria was an attractive woman in her early 30s, with long black hair and the kind of polished appearance that suggested expensive tastes. She looked nothing like Emma, which somehow made the betrayal feel even worse. "How did you find out about her rent?" "I have contacts in property management. Her lease application is on file, and it lists her income as $78,000 annually. Spending more than 40% of your gross income on rent is generally considered financially irresponsible, unless you have other sources of income." Marcus opened another folder. "Which brings us to the interesting part. Victoria has been taking expensive vacations for the past 18 months. Aspen in December 2023, Cabo in February 2024, Europe for 2 weeks last summer. These aren't budget trips we're talking about." He showed Emma printed screenshots from Victoria's social media accounts, photos of first-class airline seats, 5-star hotels, expensive meals. In several of the photos, Emma could see a man's hand or arm at the edge of the frame, but no clear shots of David. Did she pay for these trips herself? "That's where it gets interesting," Marcus said with a slight smile. "I traced the bookings for the Aspen and Cabo trips. Both were paid for with a credit card registered to Martinez Consulting, LLC. Emma felt her stomach clench. David's business account. Exactly. He's been writing off romantic getaways with his mistress's business expenses. Emma thought about their marriage, how David had always been careful about money, how they'd shared a budget and discussed every major purchase. Meanwhile, he'd been spending thousands of dollars on another woman and claiming it as a tax deduction. What about the Europe trip? That one's even more interesting. The trip was booked through a luxury travel agency, total cost around $15,000. But it wasn't paid for with David's card. It was paid for with a card registered to Innovate Solutions. Emma frowned. Her employer paid for her vacation? Not exactly. I did some digging into Innovate Solutions' corporate structure. Turns out David's consulting company has been doing work for them since early 2023. Marketing consulting, strategic planning, that sort of thing. The pieces were starting to come together in Emma's mind. So David created a business relationship with Victoria's company, which gave him legitimate reasons to be in contact with her, and then used company funds to pay for their personal trips. That's certainly one interpretation, Marcus said. And it gets better. I found records of 3 separate consulting contracts between Martinez Consulting and Innovate Solutions over the past 2 years, totaling $127,000 in fees. Emma did the math quickly. David's consulting business had been moderately successful during their marriage, but he'd never landed contracts that large. Combined with his other clients, he would have been making significantly more money than he'd claimed during their divorce proceedings. Marcus, this means David hid income during our divorce, doesn't it? I can't give you legal advice, but I can tell you that if someone fails to disclose income during divorce proceedings, that's generally considered fraud. Emma felt a surge of anger that surprised her with its intensity. She'd spent months blaming herself for the failure of their marriage, wondering what she could have done differently. Now she was learning that David had been systematically deceiving her for years, not just about the affair, but about their entire financial situation. "There's more," Marcus said, opening a third folder. "I interviewed several current and former employees at Innovate Solutions. According to my sources, Victoria Chen has been promoted twice in the past 18 months, including a promotion to marketing director that came with a significant salary increase." "How significant?" "Her current salary is actually $95,000, not the $78,000 listed on her apartment application. That's nearly a 20% increase from her previous position." Emma stared at the documents in front of her. So she's claiming that her affair with David damaged her career, but she's actually been promoted and received substantial raises. During the same period? That's correct. And according to my sources, she's well regarded at the company. Her supervisors describe her as ambitious, professional, and effective. One person I spoke with mentioned that she's been talking about starting her own marketing firm. With David? That's unclear, but it's possible. What is clear is that Victoria Chen's career has flourished during her relationship with your ex-husband, not suffered. Marcus closed the folders and leaned back in his chair. "Emma, I've been doing this kind of work for 15 years, and I've never seen a case quite like this. Most of the time when someone sues for emotional damages, there's at least some evidence of actual damage. Victoria Chen appears to have benefited significantly from her relationship with David, both personally and professionally." Emma felt a mix of vindication and rage. So her entire lawsuit is based on lies. It appears that way. But there's one more thing you should know before you decide how to proceed. Marcus pulled out a final folder, this one thicker than the others. "I did some research into Victoria Chen's background, her previous relationships, her legal history." Emma braced herself for more revelations. "She's done this before." "What do you mean?" 3 years ago in San Francisco, Victoria was involved with a married man named Robert Kim. Kim was a venture capitalist, married with 2 children. When his wife found out about the affair and Kim ended the relationship, Victoria sued both, Kim and his wife, for emotional distress and breach of promise. Emma felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. She sued the wife, among other things. She claimed that Mrs. Kim had harassed her at work and damaged her reputation. The case was settled out of court for an undisclosed amount, but my sources suggest it was substantial. So this is Victoria's pattern. She gets involved with married men, and when the relationships end, she sues everyone involved. It appears that way. The Kim case was sealed as part of the settlement, which is why it didn't show up in a basic background check. I only found it because I have contacts in the San Francisco legal community. Emma sat in stunned silence, trying to process what she'd learned. David hadn't just betrayed her with an affair. He'd gotten involved with a woman who made a habit of exploiting married men and their wives. Marcus, if Victoria settled the Kim case for a substantial amount, that means she has more money than she's claiming, doesn't it? Almost certainly. Settlement money isn't typically reported as income on apartment applications or loan documents. She could have tens of thousands of dollars in assets that aren't reflected in her public financial records. Emma thought about the luxury apartment, the expensive vacations, the BMW. Victoria Chen wasn't a victim. She was a predator, and Emma was her latest target. "I need to call Sarah immediately," Emma said, pulling out her phone. "Before you do," Marcus said, "I should warn you that Victoria's lawyer probably knows about her history. The fact that they're proceeding with this case anyway suggests they're confident they can win, or they're hoping you'll settle rather than fight." "They're wrong," Emma said firmly. "I'm not settling anything. I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what Victoria Chen is." As Emma drove back to her apartment, her mind was racing with everything Marcus had revealed. David hadn't just cheated on her. He'd committed fraud during their divorce, hidden significant income, and gotten involved with a woman who had a history of exploiting married men. But more than anything, Emma felt a profound sense of relief. For months, she'd been questioning her own worth, wondering why she hadn't been enough for David. Now she understood that David's betrayal had nothing to do with her shortcomings, and everything to do with his own character, or lack thereof, The time she reached her apartment, Emma had made a decision. She wasn't just going to fight Victoria Chen's lawsuit. She was going to expose Victoria for what she really was. And she was going to make sure David faced consequences for his fraud. Sarah. Martinez answered her phone on the second ring. Sarah, it's Emma. We need to meet immediately. You're not going to believe what Marcus found. I'm in court until 5, but I can meet you after that. How urgent is this? Sarah, Victoria Chen has done this before. She's sued another married couple for the exact same thing. And David has been hiding income from our divorce. We're not just fighting a frivolous lawsuit anymore. We're dealing with fraud and a serial predator. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Emma, I'm going to cancel my evening appointments. Can you be at my office at 6? I'll be there. Emma spent the rest of the afternoon reviewing Marcus's files and making her own notes. By the time she arrived at Sarah's office, she had a clear picture of what they were dealing with and what she wanted to do about it. Sarah was waiting with coffee and a whiteboard covered in legal terms Emma didn't recognize. Tell me everything, Sarah said. Emma walked through Marcus's findings systematically. The hidden income, the business relationship between David and Victoria's company, the expensive trips, Victoria's previous lawsuit against the Kim family, and the evidence that Victoria's career had actually benefited from her relationship with David. This changes everything, Sarah said when Emma finished. We're not just defending against a nuisance lawsuit anymore. We have grounds for serious counterclaims. Sarah turned to the whiteboard and began writing. First, we're going to amend our motion to dismiss to include evidence of Victoria's fraudulent claims. Second, we're going to file a countersuit not just for emotional distress, but for attempted extortion and fraud. Third, we're going to petition the court to reopen your divorce case based on David's hidden assets. Emma felt a thrill of anticipation. Can we really do all of that? Not only can we do it, we're going to do it. And Emma, there's something else we need to consider. This case is going to attract media attention now, especially with Victoria's history. Are you prepared for that? Emma thought about the question seriously. A week ago, the idea of media attention would have terrified her. Now, it felt like an opportunity. Yes, she said. I want people to know what Victoria Chen really is, and I want other women to know that they don't have to be victims. Sarah smiled. Good, because I think we're about to make some legal history. The story broke on a Tuesday morning in March, 3 months after Emma had received Victoria's letter. Channel 7 News led with the headline, "Local woman sues ex-wife for dating her husband." But by the afternoon, the national outlets had picked it up with more sensational angles. Mistress sues wife in unprecedented legal battle, and woman demands $50,000 from ex-wife for emotional damages. Emma watched the coverage from Sarah's office, feeling surreal as her story became national news. The reporters had focused on the unusual nature of Victoria's lawsuit, but they'd also included details about Victoria's previous case in San Francisco and David's hidden income. The phone's been ringing all morning, Sarah told her. Interview requests, legal commentary shows, women's rights organizations. You've become the poster child for standing up to predatory behavior. Emma's phone buzzed with a text from her sister in Phoenix. Saw you on the news. Go get 'em, sis. How do you feel about all this attention? Sarah asked. Emma considered the question. Honestly, I feel powerful for the first time in years. I'm not hiding anymore, and I'm not ashamed of what happened to me. The court hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning. Victoria's lawyer, Thomas Morrison, had tried to have the case moved to a private arbitration, but Sarah had successfully argued that the public interest in the case warranted a public hearing. Wednesday evening, Emma received an unexpected phone call from David. Emma, we need to talk. Can you meet me somewhere private? I don't think that's a good idea, David. You should talk to my lawyer if you have something to say. Please, Emma. This has gotten out of hand. Victoria she's not handling the media attention well. Emma almost laughed. She's not handling it well? David, she sued me for $50,000 because she chose to have an affair with a married man. How did she think this was going to end? She didn't expect it to become national news. Her employer is asking questions about the consulting contracts, and her family is... They didn't know about us. That sounds like Victoria's problem, not mine. Emma, what if we could work out a settlement? Make this all go away? Emma felt a familiar surge of anger. Even now, David was trying to protect Victoria while leaving Emma to clean up the mess. David, tomorrow morning I'm going to court, and I'm going to tell a judge exactly what kind of people you and Victoria are. I'm going to present evidence of your fraud, her pattern of predatory behavior, and the damage you've both caused. There is no settlement that would make me give up that opportunity. Emma, please. David, you made your choice when you decided to cheat on me with a woman who makes a living suing the wives of her married lovers. Now you get to live with the consequences. Emma hung up and turned off her phone. Tomorrow would be her day in court, literally and figuratively. Thursday morning arrived clear and cold, with fresh snow dusting the Rocky Mountains visible from downtown Denver. Emma dressed carefully in a navy blue suit, professional, confident, and memorable. Sarah met her at the courthouse steps, where a small crowd of reporters had gathered. Remember, Sarah said quietly as they walked through the crowd, we're here to present facts, not to perform for the cameras. Let the evidence speak for itself. The courtroom was packed, with journalists filling the gallery and sketch artists, positioned for good views of the participants. Emma took her seat at the plaintiff's table. They were now the plaintiffs, having filed their countersuit, and tried to remain calm as Victoria Chen entered with her lawyer. Victoria looked smaller, in person than in her social media photos, and less polished than Emma had expected. She wore a conservative black suit, and her usual confident demeanor seemed shaken. She avoided eye contact with Emma completely. David entered a few minutes later and took a seat in the gallery. He looked tired and older than his 36 years, and Emma felt nothing but cold satisfaction at his discomfort. Judge Patricia Wong called the court to order and began by addressing the unusual nature of the case. We're here today to resolve several interconnected claims, Judge Wong said. Ms. Chen is seeking damages from Ms. Martinez for alleged interference with her relationship and career. Ms. Martinez has filed counterclaims for attempted extortion, fraud, and emotional distress. Additionally, there are questions about financial disclosure in the Martinez divorce proceedings. Thomas Morrison, Victoria's lawyer, presented his case first. He argued that Victoria had suffered genuine emotional distress from being involved with a married man, and that Emma's refusal to divorce David earlier had prolonged Victoria's suffering. My client made career decisions based on her relationship with David Martinez, Morrison said. She turned down job opportunities, relocated for what she believed was a committed relationship, only to discover that Mr. Martinez was unable to fully commit due to his existing marriage. Emma listened to the argument with growing disbelief. Morrison was essentially arguing that Victoria was a victim of her own poor choices, and that Emma should pay for those choices. When Sarah stood to present their case, the courtroom fell silent. Your Honor, Sarah began, the evidence will show that Victoria Chen is not a victim, but a predator who has made a pattern of targeting married men and then seeking financial compensation from their families when these relationships inevitably end. Sarah methodically presented Marcus Rivera's findings, the evidence of Victoria's previous lawsuit in San Francisco, David's hidden income and fraudulent business expenses, Victoria's career advancement during her affair, and her luxurious lifestyle funded by David's fraud. Ms. Chen claims that her relationship with David Martinez damaged her career, Sarah continued, but the evidence shows the opposite. During the 2 years of this affair, Ms. Chen received 2 promotions and a nearly 20% salary increase. She has lived a lifestyle far above her means, funded by money that David Martinez hid from his wife during their divorce proceedings. Sarah then called Marcus Rivera to testify about his investigation. Marcus presented his findings in clear, factual terms, showing photographs of Victoria's expensive lifestyle and documenting the timeline of her career advancement. When Thomas Morrison cross-examined Marcus, he tried to argue that Victoria's promotions were unrelated to her relationship with David, but Marcus was prepared. According to interviews with her colleagues, Marcus testified, Ms. Chen's relationship with David Martinez was well known at Innovate Solutions. Several people mentioned that she seemed to have inside information about marketing trends and strategies that gave her an advantage in presentations and planning meetings. The implications were clear. Victoria had been using information from David's consulting business to advance her own career. Sarah then called Emma to testify. Emma had been nervous about this moment, but as she sat in the witness chair and looked out at the packed courtroom, she felt calm and determined. Ms. Martinez, Sarah began. Did you know about your husband's affair with Victoria Chen? No, I did not. I learned about it for the first time when I received Ms. Chen's lawsuit. During your marriage, did David Martinez ever mention Victoria Chen? Never. He mentioned attending conferences and networking events, but he never mentioned anyone specific. Were you aware that David was earning significantly more money than he disclosed during your divorce proceedings? No. We shared our financial information throughout our marriage, and David handled most of the business finances. I trusted him to be honest about our assets. Sarah walked Emma through the timeline of their marriage counseling, David's request for divorce, and the discovery of his deceptions. Emma spoke clearly and calmly, sticking to facts rather than emotions. When Thomas Morrison cross-examined Emma, he tried to suggest that she must have known about the affair and chosen to ignore it. Ms. Martinez, isn't it true that your marriage was troubled for years before the divorce? We had some difficulties, which is why we went to counseling, but I believed we were working through them together. Didn't you suspect that your husband might be involved with someone else? No, I didn't. I trusted my husband to be honest with me. That trust was misplaced. Morrison tried several more approaches, but Emma remained consistent and credible. She could see from the judge's expressions that her testimony was having an impact. The final witness was David himself, called by Sarah under subpoena. David looked uncomfortable as he took the oath, and his discomfort only increased as Sarah questioned him about his business dealings and hidden income. Mr. Martinez, did you disclose all of your income during your divorce proceedings? David's lawyer had clearly prepared him for this question. I disclosed what I believed was required under Colorado law. That's not what I asked. Did you disclose the $127,000 you earned from consulting contracts with Innovate Solutions? David hesitated. Those contracts were ongoing at the time of the divorce. I wasn't sure if future income needed to be disclosed. Mr. Martinez, these contracts began in early 2023, more than a year before you filed for divorce. Are you testifying that you considered $127,000 in completed work to be future income? I may have made an error in my calculations. Sarah presented bank records showing that David had received payment for these contracts well before the divorce proceedings began. The evidence was clear. David had committed fraud by hiding significant assets. Mr. Martinez, how long have you been in a relationship with Victoria Chen? About 2 years. And during that time, did you pay for personal expenses for Ms. Chen, using business funds? David's lawyer objected. But Judge Wong allowed the question. I may have occasionally mixed business and personal expenses. Mr. Martinez, you paid for Ms. Chen's vacation to Aspen using your business credit card and deducted it as a business expense on your taxes. Is that what you mean by occasionally mixed? David looked defeated. Yes. Sarah continued questioning David about the various ways he had subsidized Victoria's lifestyle, from expensive dinners to luxury vacations to direct financial support. By the time she finished, it was clear that Victoria had been living off David's fraud for 2 years. Thomas Morrison's closing argument focused on Victoria's emotional distress and the unfairness of being involved with a married man who couldn't commit fully to their relationship. But his argument felt hollow after the evidence Sarah had presented. Sarah's closing was devastating. Your Honor, Victoria Chen is not a victim. She is a predator who has made a career of targeting married men and then seeking financial compensation when these relationships end. She did this in San Francisco with Robert Kim, and she's doing it now with Emma Martinez. The evidence shows that Victoria Chen benefited enormously from her relationship with David Martinez. Her career advanced, her lifestyle improved, and she lived at a standard far above her means. She has no legal standing to sue Emma Martinez for being married to her own husband. Meanwhile, Emma Martinez is the true victim here. She was deceived by her husband for 2 years, defrauded out of assets during her divorce, and then sued by her husband's mistress for the crime of being married. Emma Martinez deserves justice, and she deserves compensation for the damage these two people have caused to her life. Judge Wong recessed for 2 hours to consider her decision. Emma and Sarah waited in a nearby cafe, barely speaking as they watched the clock. When court reconvened, the gallery was packed again. Judge Wong took her seat and began reading her decision. This is one of the most unusual cases I have encountered in 20 years on the bench, she began. After careful consideration of all evidence and testimony, I am prepared to rule on all claims. First, regarding Victoria Chen's lawsuit against Emma Martinez. This claim is dismissed in its entirety. Ms. Chen has no legal standing to sue Ms. Martinez for being married to David Martinez. Marriage is a legal relationship, and spouses cannot be held liable for exercising their legal rights. Furthermore, the evidence presented shows that Ms. Chen's claims of career and financial damage are not supported by facts. Ms. Chen's career advanced significantly during her relationship with David Martinez, and she lived a lifestyle far above her stated means. The court finds that Ms. Chen's lawsuit was frivolous and was filed in bad faith. Ms. Chen is ordered to pay Ms. Martinez's legal fees and court costs. Regarding Emma Martinez's counterclaims, the court finds that Ms. Chen did attempt to extort money from Ms. Martinez through false claims of damage. The court awards Ms. Martinez $25,000 in compensatory damages and $10,000 in punitive damages. Regarding David Martinez's financial disclosure during the divorce proceedings, the court finds clear evidence of fraud. Mr. Martinez deliberately concealed significant assets and income during his divorce. The divorce settlement is hereby reopened, and Mr. Martinez is ordered to pay Ms. Martinez her rightful share of all hidden assets, plus interest and penalties. Finally, the court is referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges related to tax fraud and perjury. Emma felt tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of relief and vindication rather than sadness. She had won completely, not just the lawsuit, but her dignity and her future. As they left the courthouse, reporters surrounded them with questions. Sarah handled most of the media attention, but Emma made one brief statement. I hope. This case sends a message that women don't have to be victims, she said. We can fight back, and we can win. 6 months later, Emma used her settlement money as a down payment on a small house in a quiet Denver neighborhood. David had been charged with tax fraud and pled guilty to a lesser charge, paying substantial fines and penalties. Victoria had been fired from her job when the full extent of her relationship with David became public, and she'd left Colorado entirely. Emma kept working at the nonprofit, but she also started volunteering with a legal aid organization that helped women navigate divorce proceedings. She'd found her purpose in helping other women avoid the deceptions she'd faced. On a crisp October morning, exactly 1 year after receiving Victoria's letter, Emma stood in the kitchen of her new home, making coffee and watching the sunrise over the mountains. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Saw the interview on Channel 7. You're inspiring women all over the country. Emma smiled and put the phone away. She had work to do, coffee to drink, and a life to live. And for the first time in years, that life was entirely her own.